I sat in the back of that reception hall watching my son dance with the woman who was planning to take everything I spent 40 years building, and I had exactly 1 hour to decide whether to let it happen or burn the whole evening down in front of 300 guests. The band was playing something slow and golden, candles flickered on every table. My son looked at her like she was the answer to every prayer he'd ever whispered, and she looked at him like a woman who had already done the math. My name is Lorraine Whitfield. I am 63 years old. I built a real estate development company from a single duplex I bought at 24, with money I saved working double shifts at a hospital laundry. Today, that company owns 42 residential properties across Charlotte, North Carolina, and the portfolio is valued at just under $38 million. I did not inherit that. I did not marry into it. I carried it with my hands, my back, and my refusal to ever let anyone tell me what I could not become. My son, Curtis, is 31. He is the kindest man I have ever known, and that kindness is both the best and most dangerous thing about him. Curtis sees people the way he wants them to be. He leads with trust. He believes that everyone who smiles at him means it. And when he brought home Deanna Mitchell 8 months ago, I watched him fall the way gentle men fall, completely and without a net. Deanna was 30, beautiful in a way that made rooms quiet when she entered. She had a voice like warm milk and manners that could charm a judge off the bench. She told Curtis she worked in nonprofit consulting. She told him she had lost her apartment in a lease dispute and needed somewhere stable. She told him her family was estranged and she had no one. Curtis, my sweet boy, opened every door. Within 3 months, she had moved into his townhouse. Within 5, she was driving the car I helped him buy. Within 7, Curtis came to me with a ring he had picked out himself and asked me if I thought Deanna would like it, and I looked at his face and saw a man who had already decided that love was the only credential a person needed. The engagement party was tonight. 300 people in the grand hall of the Meridian Hotel in uptown Charlotte. I had paid for the venue because Curtis asked me to, and because saying no to my son when his eyes shine like that has always been my weakness. But I want to be honest with you right now. Before I go any further, if you are listening to this from your couch, your car, your kitchen while you cook dinner, tell me in the comments where you are right now. Because what happened at that party changed my family forever, and some stories need people who are willing to sit with the truth. The evening start low, the way expensive evenings always start. Valet parking, champagne on silver trays, women in gowns that cost more than my first mortgage payment. I wore navy blue because navy blue says I am here, I am steady, and I am watching. Curtis greeted guests like a man who believed the world had finally given him what he deserved. Deanna stood beside him in ivory, her hand resting on his arm like she had been trained to stand that way. Her smile was flawless. Not warm, flawless. There is a difference, and it takes a woman my age to know it. Deanna's mother arrived late, Paulette Mitchell. I had met her only twice before, both times briefly, both times carefully managed by Deanna, like a stage director making sure nobody saw behind the curtain. Paulette was 55, sharp-faced, well-dressed in a way that looked borrowed. Her jewelry was real but mismatched, the kind of collection a woman builds from gifts she received from men she chose strategically. When she hugged me, she held on half a second too long, the way people do when they want you to feel appreciated, so you stop asking questions. Paulette, Deanna had told Curtis, was a retired schoolteacher from Raleigh. She was on a fixed income. She was proud but struggling. She did not like to ask for help. That story had always felt rehearsed to me, the edges too smooth, the details too convenient, but I kept my suspicions folded in my pocket, because my son's happiness is not a place I trespass lightly. The cocktail hour moved the way cocktail hours move. Laughter, small talk, somebody's uncle already too loud after 2 glasses of wine. I circulated slowly, accepting compliments, shaking hands, watching. I watched the way Deanna steered Curtis away from my attorney when he tried to introduce himself. I watched the way Paulette positioned herself near my business partner's wife and asked questions that sounded casual but pointed directly at numbers. I watched the way Deanna's eyes moved across the room, not like a woman in love but like a woman taking inventory. Around 8 o'clock, the coordinator asked everyone to move into the main dining room for dinner and toasts. I excused myself to use the restroom because my knees needed a moment and my mind needed silence. The ladies' room on the main floor had a line, so I walked down the corridor toward the smaller restroom near the service entrance, the one tucked behind the kitchen that most guests would never find. The corridor was dim, lined with framed photos of the hotel's history, and it smelled like starch and grilled onions from the kitchen. My heels were quiet on the carpet. I was not sneaking. I was simply walking slowly because 63-year-old knees do not negotiate marble floors at a young woman's pace. And then I heard them. The service hallway had a small alcove near the storage closet, half hidden by a rolling cart stacked with tablecloths. The voices came from there, low and laughing, the kind of laughter that people make when they believe they are alone and the walls belong to them. I recognized Paulette's voice first because it had a sharpness underneath the sweetness, like biting into fruit that looks ripe but is not. 6 months, Paulette was saying. That is all you need. 6 months married and everything shifts. Deanna's voice came next, quieter, more controlled. I know, Mama. I have been doing this right. Paulette laughed softly. You have been doing this perfectly. He does not even question you. He pays your phone bill, your credit cards, your student loans, and he thinks it is love. My hand found the wall beside me and pressed flat against it. My body understood what was happening before my mind caught up. Deanna's tone dropped into something practical, something businesslike, and it was that shift that made my stomach turn, because it was the voice of a woman who had never been in love, only in position. Once we are married, Deanna said, I get him to add me to the deed on the townhouse first. That is the easiest one, then the joint account. Then I start asking about his mother's company. Not directly. I will say I want to learn the business so I can support him. I will say I want to be a partner in his life, not just his wife. Paulette made a sound of approval, a small hum, proud and hungry at the same time. And his mother? She asked. Deanna paused. Lorraine is smart, she said, and hearing my name in her mouth made my skin go cold. She watches everything. She does not trust me yet, but she trusts Curtis, and Curtis trusts me. So I do not need Lorraine to like me. I just need Curtis to stop listening to her. Paulette's voice sharpened. How? Deanna answered like she had rehearsed it. I have already started. I told Curtis that his mother is controlling. I said it gently. I said I understand she built everything herself, but she treats him like he cannot make his own decisions. He got quiet when I said it, which means it landed. My jaw tightened so hard I felt the ache spread into my temples. Paulette laughed again. That is my girl. You separate the son from the mother, and the mother's money has no bodyguard. Deanna's voice lifted, almost playful. And the properties, Mama, 38 million. She said it the way someone says a destination they have been driving toward for a long time. That woman built an empire, and her only heir is a man who cannot say no to a woman he loves. Paulette responded, and the words came out slick and final. Then you make sure he loves you more than he loves her opinion. Because once you are family, once your name is on things, once you have a child, there is no door Lorraine Whitfield can close that you cannot open. A child. That word hit me like a hand across the face because it meant this was not just a plan to take money, it was a plan to take my family. To use a grandchild as leverage. To turn my own blood into a lock they could pick whenever they wanted access. Deanna lowered her voice. Curtis already asked me about starting a family next year, she said, and I told him I wanted to wait until we were settled, but settled means what I decide it means. Paulette hummed approval. Settled means his name and your name on enough paper that leaving costs him more than staying. I stood there in that hallway with my back against the wall, my clutch pressed to my ribs, and I felt something I had not felt since the early years when banks told me no and landlords laughed at my applications. I felt the ground shifting under me, and I knew that standing still was not an option. But I did not move. Not yet. Because I had made this mistake once before in my life, reacting before I had proof, speaking before I had leverage, and it had cost me a contract worth $2 million and a year of recovery. I was not going to let emotion do what strategy could do better. I reached into my clutch with steady fingers and opened the voice memo app on my phone. I pressed record, and I held that phone against my body like a woman adjusting her purse, and I let them keep talking. Deanna spoke for another 4 minutes. She described how she had convinced Curtis to add her to his health insurance already. She mentioned a credit card she had opened in both their names without telling him the limit she requested. She talked about a conversation she planned to have after the wedding, where she would suggest they simplify their finances by merging everything into one account, hers, because she wanted to handle the household so Curtis could focus on his career. She even mentioned a prenup. She said Curtis had never brought it up, and she planned to keep it that way by telling him that prenups show a lack of trust, and trust is the foundation of marriage. Paulette added her own detail. She told Deanna to make sure she got pregnant within the first year because a child changes custody math, and custody math changes financial obligations for decades. When the voices finally stopped, and I heard footsteps moving away, I lowered my phone and looked at the recording. 7 minutes and 14 seconds. 7 minutes of my son's future being dismantled in advance by two women who had never loved anything about him except what he was connected to. I walked back toward the dining room on legs that felt borrowed. The lights were brighter now. The music was louder. Curtis was standing near the head table, holding a glass of champagne, laughing with his college roommate, like a man who had no idea the woman beside him was measuring the width of his pockets. Deanna appeared from the hallway behind me, face fresh, smile perfect, and she caught my eye and mouthed the words, "Love you, Mom." From across the room, pressing her hand to her chest like a woman overcome with gratitude. I smiled back, because I needed her to believe she was safe. The toasts began. Curtis's best friend stood up and said beautiful things about love and loyalty and the kind of man Curtis was. The room glowed with sincerity. Deanna wiped a tear from her cheek, and I watched her hand to see if the tear was real. It was not. Her eyes were dry before her hand reached her face. She had learned the motion without learning the feeling. Paulette stood up next. She gave a toast about welcoming Curtis into their family, about how grateful she was that her daughter had found a man of substance. The word substance sat wrong in the air, but only I heard it land. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly. I smoothed my dress. I picked up my glass and held it steady because my hands have never shaken when my child needed me. The room went quiet the way rooms do when a mother speaks at her son's celebration. 300 faces turned toward me with soft expectation, and I gave them what they expected for exactly 45 seconds. I told them Curtis was my greatest accomplishment. I told them I had watched him grow into a man who leads with his heart. I told them that as his mother, my only job tonight was to make sure he was protected. The word protected shifted something in the room. Not much. Just enough for the attentive ones to sit up slightly. Then I said, and my voice did not waver, I believe that the people we bring into our family should love us for who we are, not for what we have built. Deanna's smile held, but I saw her fingers tighten around her glass. I continued, I believe that honesty is not optional in a marriage, and I believe that when the truth needs to be spoken, the hardest place to speak it is in a room full of people who would rather keep celebrating. The room got quieter. Curtis looked at me with confusion beginning to form behind his eyes. Deanna's smile stayed fixed, but her posture stiffened the way a body stiffens when it senses danger before the mind names it. I set down my glass. I pulled my phone from my clutch, and I said, simply, clearly, without anger, I need everyone in this room to hear something I heard 30 minutes ago in the hallway of this hotel. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the ice settling in water glasses. Deanna stood up. Mom, she started, reaching toward Curtis as if to anchor herself. What is this? I did not look at her. I looked at my son because the next 60 seconds were going to change his life, and he deserved to see my face when it happened. I pressed play. The sound was clear. Hotel hallways carry voices well when the doors are closed and the carpet is thick. Paulette's voice came first, casual and calculating, then Deanna's, steady and strategic. The room leaned in. 300 people frozen mid-breath, forks lowered, napkins gripped, when Deanna's voice said, 38 million. That woman built an empire, and her only heir is a man who cannot say no to a woman he loves. The gasp that moved through the room was not shock. It was recognition. It was the sound of people understanding all at once that the beautiful evening they had been enjoying was built on a lie. Curtis's face did not collapse. It emptied, like someone had opened a door inside him and everything he believed walked out. He stared at my phone as if it were a living thing that had betrayed him. Then his eyes moved to Deanna, slowly, carefully, like he was looking at a stranger wearing a familiar face. Deanna reacted fast. She reached for his arm, voice dropping into that sweet, practiced tone. "Baby," she said, "that is not what it sounds like." She was twisting everything. "She has always been against us." Paulette stood up from her seat, face rigid, and pointed a trembling finger at me. "You recorded a private conversation," she snapped. "That is illegal. I will call the police. I will sue you." I did not raise my voice. I did not argue. I simply said, "You are welcome to call anyone you like. But everyone in this room has already heard what you said, and my son deserves to know who he is standing next to." Curtis pulled his arm away from Deanna's grip. Not violently, gently. The way you pull your hand back from something that just revealed itself to be hot. He looked at her, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet and cracked. "Is it true?" Deanna's eyes filled with tears, perfect, practiced tears, and she shook her head. "Curtis, please," she whispered. "You know me. You know my heart." Curtis swallowed. His eyes moved to Paulette, who had sat back down and was whispering furiously into her phone. Then he looked back at Deanna, and I watched my son do the hardest thing a gentleman can do. He looked past the beauty and the tears and the voice he had loved, and he saw the architecture underneath. He turned to me. His eyes were wet but steady. "Mom," he said, and his voice broke on the word. I heard it. That was enough. 3 words. I heard it. It meant he was choosing truth over comfort, even though it was going to cost him everything he had imagined his future would be. Deanna tried once more. She stepped toward him, hands lifted, palms open like a woman trying to prove she held no weapons. "Curtis, we can talk about this privately," she said. "This is not the place." A woman at the nearest table, someone I had known for 20 years, stood up and said, clearly, "I think this is exactly the place." Another voice followed. A man near the back. She said what she said. We all heard it. Deanna's composure cracked. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for a single face that might take her side, and found none. Paulette grabbed her purse and stood up, chin lifted, trying to salvage dignity from wreckage. "This is disgraceful," she said, but her voice shook on the last syllable. I looked at Paulette and said one sentence. "You came into my family to take what I built. You planned to use my son as a tool and my future grandchild as leverage, and you called it love." The room exhaled as one body. A woman near the candles pressed her hand to her mouth. A man shook his head slowly, lips tight. Somebody's phone camera flashed, and nobody apologized for it. Deanna's mask fell completely, her face twisted, and for the first time, I saw the real woman underneath. Not the nonprofit consultant, not the sweet girlfriend. A woman caught in the open, without a story to sell. She grabbed her clutch from the table and walked toward the exit. She did not run. She walked fast, heels clicking against the floor like a countdown. Paulette followed, whispering something sharp and bitter, and the two of them disappeared through the double doors without looking back. The room stayed quiet for 3 full seconds after the doors closed. Then Curtis sat down heavily in his chair, elbows on the table, head in his hands, and made a sound that broke me. Not crying. Something before crying. The sound your body makes when it realizes the future it was holding just evaporated. I moved to him. I sat beside him. I put my hand on his back, firm and warm, and I did not speak because some moments do not need words. They need presence. They need a mother's hand on your spine reminding you that the ground is still there, even when everything above it has collapsed. Guests began to leave quietly. Some stopped to squeeze Curtis's shoulder. Some murmured words of support. My business partner's wife touched my arm and whispered, "You did the right thing." A few people lingered, unsure how to transition from celebration to aftermath. The band packed up silently. The candles burned down. The champagne went flat in glasses no one finished. Curtis lifted his head after a long time and looked at me with red eyes and a jaw set hard against the trembling. "How long did you know?" he asked. 30 minutes, I said honestly. "I heard them in the hallway tonight." He nodded slowly. Then his face crumpled and the tears came. Not loud, not dramatic. the quiet kind that men cry when they realize they have been made a fool of by someone they would have given everything to. I held my son in that empty ballroom while the waitstaff cleared plates around us and pretended not to see. I held him the way I held him when he was 7, and the boys at school told him his father was never coming back. I held him like the world outside could wait, because inside this moment, he needed to know he was not alone. She was going to take everything, he whispered into my shoulder, and I was going to let her. You were going to love her, I said quietly. That is what you were doing. Do not confuse loving with losing. The weeks that followed were not gentle. Curtis moved slowly through his days like a man recovering from surgery. He canceled the wedding, he changed the locks on his townhouse. He sat with my attorney and reviewed every document, every account, every signature he had given during the relationship. What they found made my blood run cold even after what I had already heard. Deanna had opened a joint credit card with a $40,000 limit that Curtis had never agreed to. She had redirected mail from his investment account to a P.O. box registered in her mother's name. She had begun paperwork to add herself to the title of his townhouse, paperwork that was sitting in a folder on his desk, labeled household admin, that he had never opened because she told him she was handling it. My attorney filed a police report. He also filed a civil suit for fraud and financial exploitation. Deanna did not respond to the summons. Paulette's phone number was disconnected within a week. Neither of them showed up to the hearing. Curtis asked me one evening if I thought any of it had been real. We were sitting on my back porch, the same porch where I taught him to ride a bicycle, the same porch where he told me he wanted to be an engineer, the same porch where he introduced me to Deanna and asked me to give her a chance. I looked at my son and told him the truth. Some people learn how to perform love the way actors learn lines. They know the words, they know the gestures, they know when to cry and when to laugh, but they never feel the scene. That does not mean your feelings were a performance. Yours were real. That is the part that matters. Curtis nodded and stared at the tree line. He did not call himself stupid. He did not call himself weak. He said, "I am going to be more careful." And I told him, "You are going to be more careful and still kind because the world does not need you harder. It needs you wiser." 3 months after the engagement party, Curtis showed up at my office wearing a new jacket and holding 2 cups of coffee. He set one on my desk and sat down across from me the way he used to when he was a teenager, asking permission to stay out past midnight. "I want to learn the business," he said. "For real this time. Not because somebody told me to. Because I want to understand what you built and how to protect it." That was the moment I knew he would be all right. Not healed yet. Healing is slower than people think, but standing, steady, choosing forward. Deanna's name comes up sometimes in conversations. Someone will mention a woman they met who reminded them of her, or a news story about romance fraud will play on the television, and the room will go quiet for a moment before someone changes the subject. She is not a ghost in our family. She is a lesson, the kind you do not forget because the tuition was almost too high to pay. Paulette never contacted us again. Whatever story she tells herself about that night, I am sure it makes her the victim. People like Paulette always find a way to be the victim. But the 300 people in that ballroom know what they heard, and some truths are too loud to rewrite. And my son, my good, kind, trusting son. He is still all of those things. But now when someone reaches for his hand, he looks at their other hand first. Not because he is afraid. Because he learned that love without discernment is just an open door with no lock, and doors without locks do not protect anything worth keeping. When people ask me if I feel guilty about how I handled that night, whether I should have spoken to Deanna privately, whether I should have waited, whether I should have let Curtis figure it out himself, I give them the same answer every time. I did not humiliate anyone. I played a recording of their own words in a room full of witnesses. If the truth humiliates you, the problem is not the person who spoke it. The problem is what you said when you thought nobody was listening. And if I had to do it again, I would not change a single thing. Because my son is sitting in my office right now, learning the business I built with my hands, drinking coffee he bought with his own money, and laughing at something his colleague said through the phone. He is safe. He is whole. He is mine. That is worth more than $38 million. That is worth more than any evening I have ever paid for. That is worth every uncomfortable second I spent standing in front of 300 people telling a truth that nobody wanted to hear. Because that is what mothers do. We do not wait for the fire to burn the house down, we smell the smoke, and we move.